My brother told the wedding planner to cancel my invitation, but to keep the $65,000 deposit I had paid. His fiancée laughed, calling me a pathetic embarrassment to their perfect family. My stepmother agreed, warning me not to show up and ruin their big day. I should have cried. I should have begged. Instead, I stayed silent. Because they didn't know the truth. The venue, the catering, and the hotel they booked, it all belonged to me. And when the wedding planner gasped, I smiled. This wasn't the end of my humiliation. It was the beginning of theirs. My brother's insults still echoed in my ears, but the sting wasn't new. Ryan had been drawing invisible lines between us for years, and each time I allowed him to push me farther to the edges of his world. From the outside, we looked like any other family, but behind closed doors, it was always me giving and him taking. When I was 12, our father passed away suddenly from a heart attack. It was the kind of blow that hollowed out a home. My mother remarried within a year, clinging to security more than love. Her new husband had money, a certain charm, and his own idea of what family should look like. From that moment, I became the shadow, the caretaker, the one who picked up the broken pieces that no one else wanted to touch. Ryan was only 7 then. I still remember his small hand clutching mine as we stood at our father's funeral. He had no idea what death meant, only that the one person who made him feel safe was gone. I promised him, right there in that cold church, that I would take care of him no matter what. That vow shaped the rest of my life. By high school, I was already working part-time at a grocery store, saving every dollar to pay for Ryan's future. While other girls my age bought prom dresses, I bought textbooks for him. When my friends talked about applying to colleges out of state, I stayed home, attending the local community college so I could keep working and be near Ryan. Each choice I made was less about me, more about him. When Ryan got accepted to a prestigious university, the tuition was astronomical. My stepfather scoffed, said he would not waste money on a dreamer. My mother stayed silent, her silence louder than any insult. So I stepped in. I worked double shifts as an entry-level accountant, living off instant noodles and second-hand clothes, funneling every extra penny into Ryan's tuition. I can still remember standing in line at the bursar's office, my hands trembling as I handed over a check that drained almost everything I had. Ryan never asked where the money came from. He just smiled and said, "Thanks, Nat." That was enough for me back then. The years blurred together, my 20s dissolving into spreadsheets, late nights, and empty apartments. I skipped vacations, postponed relationships, and turned down promotions that would require me to move away. Every sacrifice was justified by a single thought: Ryan deserves better. And for a time, I believed it was worth it. Ryan thrived at college. He was handsome, charming, and charismatic, the kind of man who drew people in effortlessly. While I dragged myself home from 12-hour days, Ryan sent photos of rooftop parties, beach trips, and expensive suits. He called less and less, and when he did, the conversations grew shorter. Still, I defended him when relatives complained he was ungrateful. "He's just busy," I said. Deep down, I clung to the hope that one day he would remember who made his success possible. But success changed him, or maybe it simply revealed who he always was. By the time he turned 29, Ryan was engaged to Sophia Caldwell, the daughter of an old money family with connections in politics and finance. The engagement was splashed across society pages, the kind of match that was less about love and more about power. Sophia was beautiful, sharp-tongued, and ruthlessly ambitious. She adored Ryan's charm, but despised everything that tethered him to the middle-class world he came from. That included me. At family gatherings, I noticed the shift. Ryan rarely introduced me as his sister. When he did, it was quick, almost dismissive. "This is Natalie, she's an accountant." Sophia barely hid her disdain, her eyes flicking over me as though calculating my worth and finding nothing. Once, at dinner, she leaned across the table and whispered loudly enough for me to hear, "She doesn't exactly fit the image, does she?" Ryan laughed. He didn't defend me. That night, I drove home with tears blurring the streetlights, wondering when my brother stopped being my brother. I became the unspoken shame in his polished narrative. He told people his father was a successful businessman, never mentioning the years of struggle, the sacrifices that kept him afloat. He spoke proudly of his future with the Caldwells, careful never to let my name cross his lips. To the world he was building, I didn't exist. But I remembered everything. I remembered the nights I stayed awake, balancing bills while he slept soundly in the next room. I remembered pawning my grandmother's necklace to pay for his textbooks. I remembered skipping meals so he could eat. Each memory was a scar that never healed, hidden beneath my quiet exterior. And now, as he prepared to marry into wealth and privilege, he erased me entirely, canceling my invitation to the very wedding I had unknowingly financed. The betrayal cut deeper than any insult, not because of the money, but because of what it meant. After a lifetime of sacrifice, I was nothing more than an inconvenience to be hidden away. If I had been anyone else, maybe I would have broken under the weight of it, but I wasn't anyone else. I was the sister who had built him, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, and he had forgotten something crucial. I had built myself too. The ivory envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, slipped into my mailbox like an afterthought. My hands trembled as I slid a finger under the seal, expecting, hoping, to find my name written in elegant script, an acknowledgement that I still belonged somewhere in my brother's life. Instead, the paper cut sharper than any knife. There was no mention of me, no seat reserved for my daughter. The invitation read like a proclamation. Ryan Harris and Sophia Caldwell request the honor of your presence, except, apparently, not mine. I read it twice, then a third time, waiting for the oversight to vanish. But the truth stared back at me in gold-embossed letters. I wasn't invited. My daughter wasn't invited. The blood drained from my face. An hour later, the phone rang. The caller ID displayed the name of the wedding planner. I answered, clinging to some foolish hope that it was a mistake. Her voice was cool, rehearsed, as if she had delivered this line a dozen times before. "Natalie, I'm calling on behalf of the Harris and Caldwell families. They've decided it would be best if you did not attend the wedding. But don't worry. The deposit you paid will be put to good use." "The deposit?" My voice cracked, though I forced it steady. "Yes, the $65,000 you wired for the venue, catering, and hotel accommodations. They'll be keeping it, of course. It's all been integrated into the wedding budget." I sat in silence, pen in hand, scribbling every word she said onto a notepad. She grew uncomfortable, her voice faltering, perhaps expecting me to cry, to beg, to argue. But I gave her nothing, just silence. "Do you understand, Ms. Harris?" "Yes," I replied flatly, jotting down the time, her exact phrasing, even the pause before she said, "keeping it." When I hung up, I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. Instead, I sat very still, my gaze unfocused. In the reflection of the window, I saw my own eyes glint, not with tears, but with something sharper, something that frightened even me. The following Sunday, I drove to my mother's house, clinging to a shred of hope that perhaps she would defend me. But when I walked through the door, her expression was already cold, rehearsed like the planners. "Natalie," she said, her tone clipped, "you need to understand. This wedding is very important for Ryan. You showing up would only cause tension. You don't want to embarrass him, do you?" Embarrass him. The words landed like stones in my chest. "I raised him," I whispered. "You did what you had to do," she snapped. "But now, let him have his life. Don't drag your past sacrifices into his future. Learn to step aside. Step aside. That was what I had been doing my entire life. Every sacrifice, every compromise, every quiet moment of surrender, I had always stepped aside. But hearing her say it aloud, as if my worth was nothing more than a shadow, made something inside me fracture. Later that week, Ryan showed up at my apartment with a stack of legal papers. His smile was easy, casual, as if nothing had changed. "Nat, I need you to sign these. Just some vendor agreements. It'll help me out a lot." I flipped through the pages. My name wasn't on the guest list, but it was scrawled in bold letters across liability clauses and payment guarantees. "You want me to take responsibility for your wedding contracts?" I asked. He shrugged. running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "You're good with numbers. This is what you do, right? Don't make a big deal out of it." "I'm not invited," I reminded him, my voice low. Ryan rolled his eyes. "Nat, don't be dramatic. It's just one night. You don't fit in with Sophia's circle. Look, you should be proud. Your money is making this possible. Think of it as your gift to us." Gift. My $65,000. My years of sacrifice. My entire life reduced to a gift. Before I could answer, Sophia herself appeared in the doorway, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She was radiant in a silk dress, her hair styled to perfection, her smile dripping with disdain. She looked at me the way one might look at dirt tracked onto a white carpet. "Ryan," she purred, ignoring me completely. "We need to finalize the guest list for the Caldwell dinner, and make sure to cut unnecessary people." Her eyes flicked toward me, then away, as if I weren't worth the effort of direct insult. I felt my throat tighten, but I forced myself to remain still. She turned back to Ryan and laughed softly, adding, "Honestly, darling, she's a zero. We can't have zeros ruining our picture-perfect day." Ryan didn't protest. He didn't correct her. He just laughed with her, as though I weren't standing there, as though I hadn't given up everything for him. The humiliation was complete. My own brother reduced me to a liability, my stepmother erased me from existence, and the woman he planned to marry dismissed me as nothing. And yet, I didn't storm out. I didn't break down. I simply signed the papers he shoved in front of me, slid them back across the table, and rose to leave. They thought I was defeated. They thought I had surrendered, as I always had. But as I closed the door behind me, the faintest smile tugged at my lips. Because what none of them realized was that I was no longer stepping aside. I was stepping into place. The wedding planner's voice quivered when she called me back a few days later, trying to smooth over the awkwardness of our last conversation. She apologized in a carefully rehearsed way, blaming family pressure and unfortunate logistics. I let her speak without interruption, her words tumbling over each other in a clumsy attempt to justify what had already been done. Finally, she sighed. "Look, Ms. Harris, I'll have to clear this with the hotel manager. They'll need to confirm the arrangement since the family's decided to amend the guest list." "Call them," I said calmly. There was a pause on the other end of the line, as if she expected me to sound broken or angry. Instead, my voice was steady, almost too steady. I could almost hear her shifting uncomfortably in her chair before she agreed. "Very well, I'll make the call." What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that she was about to call me. I had spent the past decade quietly building something no one in my family cared enough to notice. From the first small investment in a rundown inn, to the expansion into catering, and finally to acquiring one of the city's most prestigious hotels, every dollar I earned had been poured back into this empire. An empire I owned, an empire they were now trampling on. The planner's email confirmed it later that day. She had tried to reach the owner and was told there might be issues. She sounded flustered, her tone suddenly deferential. It amused me. For years, I had been treated like a servant in my own family, and now the woman who dismissed me as irrelevant was realizing, without knowing why, that she had underestimated me. I didn't reveal myself yet. Timing was everything. 2 nights later, I attended a gala at the very hotel they had booked for the wedding. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and champagne, filled with the kind of people who had never glanced twice at me before. As I moved through the crowd, a familiar voice stopped me. "Nat!" I turned and saw him, Ethan Miller. It had been more than a decade since I'd last laid eyes on him. Back then, he was a broke graduate student struggling to pay tuition, and I was the one who covered his rent one desperate month, insisting he not drop out. He had sworn to pay me back one day. Now, here he was, impeccably dressed, commanding the attention of a circle of businessmen, his name whispered with respect across the city. "You look—" He hesitated, searching for the right word. "Powerful." I laughed softly. "I suppose life changes people." He studied me, and his smile faded. "No, not life. Pain does. And you wear it well, Nat." We spent the evening catching up, but eventually my story spilled out. Ryan, Sophia, the humiliation, the stolen money. His eyes darkened with every detail. Finally, he leaned closer. "Tell me what you want done." "I want them to see me," I whispered. "For once in their lives, I want them to see who I really am." Ethan nodded slowly, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. "Then let me stand with you." The night of the rehearsal dinner arrived. Guests flowed into the hotel lobby, laughing and clinking glasses. Ryan strutted like royalty. Sophia clung to his arm, her diamond earrings sparkling like daggers in the light. The wedding planner fluttered nervously around them, whispering into her headset. When she spotted me standing by the reception desk, her face drained of color. "Ms. Harris, you shouldn't be here." "Why not?" I asked evenly. "The families were very clear. You're not allowed on site without authorization from the owner." I tilted my head, letting her squirm in the silence. Finally, I said, "Then maybe you should ask the owner." Her confusion was almost comical. She stammered something about calling him immediately. I gave her a small nod. "Go ahead." When her phone rang at the front desk and she realized the line connected directly to me, her jaw dropped. Around us, a few guests began to murmur, sensing something unusual. Before she could recover, Ethan appeared at my side, his presence commanding, his gaze fixed on Ryan and Sophia. He spoke just loudly enough for the surrounding guests to hear. "There's a lesson here. In business and in life, you never, ever disrespect your partners, or you pay the price." Ryan's face blanched. Sophia's smile faltered for the first time that evening. I stepped forward, meeting my brother's eyes. "Cancel the wedding," I said simply. The silence that followed was suffocating. Forks clinked against plates, conversations died mid-sentence. Ryan sputtered, You can't do that." But Ethan cut him off, his tone sharp as steel. "She can. She owns this hotel, the venue, the catering. Every contract you've signed runs through her. So yes, she can do that, and more." Gasps rippled through the room. Sophia's cheeks flushed crimson, her hand tightening on Ryan's arm. Guests whispered, their eyes darting between us, eager for scandal. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The power had shifted, and everyone felt it. My silence, once mistaken for weakness, had become the most deafening weapon of all. As I turned to leave, the question hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and unavoidable. Would I really cancel the entire wedding? And in that suspended moment, with the world watching, I let them wonder. The stunned silence of the rehearsal dinner lingered long after I walked out of the ballroom. My words had cut through the glittering facade Ryan and Sophia had built, but what the crowd didn't know, what no one knew, was that this wasn't a spontaneous act of vengeance. It was the culmination of years of choices, quiet sacrifices, and a patience most people mistook for weakness. That night, as I sat alone in my office, the memories came rushing back like a tide I could no longer hold back. I remembered the first motel I bought, a crumbling 2-story building with leaky pipes and faded carpets. Everyone told me it was a waste of money, that I was foolish to think I could turn it around. But I saw potential. I saw something no one else did. I spent nights repainting the walls myself, fixing plumbing with the help of YouTube videos, negotiating with contractors who sneered at me for being a young woman out of her depth. So, I lived in one of the tiny rooms, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, eating ramen while every cent I earned went back into renovations. Slowly, the place filled with guests. Slowly, it turned a profit. That first success became another, then another. I bought a catering company, then a restaurant, then the hotel where Ryan now planned to cement his entry into high society. Piece by piece, brick by brick, I built an empire from the very wages I had once used to pay for his textbooks and his rent. My sacrifices for him had also become the seed money for my future, a future he had never asked about because he never cared enough to wonder. Ethan had been part of that story too. I remembered the night he showed up at my apartment all those years ago, desperate and ashamed. His scholarship had fallen through. He was days away from being evicted. He couldn't look me in the eye when he asked for help. I gave him every dollar I had saved for a new car, telling him I could manage without one a little longer. He wept with gratitude, swearing he would never forget. And he hadn't. While I was quietly building my businesses, Ethan was building his own, rising from obscurity to become one of the city's most respected entrepreneurs. When our paths crossed again, it wasn't by accident. He had been watching, waiting, and when I needed someone to stand beside me, he was there. For years, my silence had been misunderstood. Ryan thought it meant submission. Sophia thought it meant irrelevance. My stepmother thought it meant obedience. But really, it had been my shield, my weapon. I was never silent because I had nothing to say. I was silent because I was preparing for the day when I wouldn't need to say anything at all. And now, that day had arrived. Word spread quickly after the rehearsal dinner. Society thrives on gossip, and this was the juiciest story in years. Whispers filled cocktail parties, salons, and boardrooms. "Did you hear? The bride's future sister-in-law owns the hotel. She paid for everything. They tried to erase her, and now she's pulling the plug." The Caldwell family was blindsided. Sophia's father, a stern man with deep ties in finance, demanded answers. When he learned that I wasn't just the owner of the venue, but also an investor in several Caldwell enterprises, his fury was volcanic. "You've humiliated us," he shouted at Sophia during a private confrontation that inevitably leaked to the press. Ryan tried to spin the story, painting me as vindictive, unstable, bitter, but the narrative slipped from his grasp. The truth was too compelling, too scandalous to bury. "The golden boy built on his sister's sacrifices," headlines whispered. "A wedding funded by betrayal." Strangers who had never met me shook their heads in pity when they read about me. Strangers who had never met Ryan cursed his name. He called me one night, his voice breaking in a way I hadn't heard since we were children. "Nat, please. You don't understand. This is my future. You can't ruin it like this. I'm sorry, okay? I'll fix it. Just don't do this." I listened, my heart twisting in that old, familiar way, the part of me that remembered the little boy holding my hand at our father's funeral. For a moment, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that my brother still lived beneath the layers of arrogance and greed. But then I thought of Sophia's mocking laugh, my mother's cold dismissal, Ryan's own words when he called my sacrifice a gift. "I'm done fixing things for you, Ryan," I said softly, and hung up. The nights that followed were restless. On the outside, I was composed, in control, my silence sharper than any blade. But in the solitude of my room, the weight of it all pressed down on me. For so long, my identity had been tied to sacrifice, to holding my family together even as they tore me apart. Now, I stood apart from them, powerful but profoundly alone. It was a strange kind of grief, mourning not the family I lost, but the illusion that they had ever truly been mine. And yet, beneath the loneliness, there was a flicker of something else. Freedom. The fallout came faster than even I expected. Within 48 hours of the rehearsal dinner scandal, the Caldwell family withdrew every contract they had with Ryan. Deals that had taken years to negotiate dissolved with a single phone call. Ryan's company, propped up by Caldwell connections, collapsed like a house of cards. Overnight, his email inbox was filled with rejections. His phone, once buzzing with invitations, went eerily silent. The final blow came from Sophia herself. She arrived at Ryan's apartment in a sleek black car, her diamond engagement ring conspicuously absent. "This is over," she said coldly, not even bothering to sit down. Ryan's face paled. "Sophia, you don't mean that. We can fix this. It's just a misunderstanding." She cut him off with a laugh, sharp as glass. "A misunderstanding? You let yourself be humiliated by your sister in front of half the city. Do you have any idea how pathetic that makes me look?" "You're nothing but a parasite, Ryan. You've been feeding off her all along, haven't you?" "I'll get it back," he stammered. "The contracts, the hotel, everything. I'll talk to Nat. She'll forgive me. She always forgives me." Her expression hardened, her eyes narrowing with contempt. "Then maybe you should marry her instead." because I won't spend another second chained to a man who can't even stand on his own 2 feet. And with that, she was gone. Later, I learned she had already aligned herself with a rival businessman, someone richer, more influential, and untouched by scandal. It was almost poetic. Ryan, who had traded love for status, found himself abandoned the moment that status evaporated. The press devoured every detail. Headlines mocked the Caldwell-Harris disaster. Tabloids splashed Sophia's new companion across their covers, and Ryan's name became synonymous with failure. For the first time in his life, my brother was no longer the golden child. He was the cautionary tale. I told myself I should feel vindicated, but when I saw the photos, Ryan, disheveled, his eyes haunted, I felt something else too. Pity, anger, sadness. It was a complicated knot of emotions that I couldn't quite untangle. At home, my stepmother's fury was volcanic. She stormed into my apartment unannounced, her face red with rage. "Do you realize what you've done?" she shouted. "You've destroyed your brother's future. He had everything lined up, and you ripped it away out of spite." I met her gaze calmly. "I didn't destroy anything. He built his future on lies and arrogance. All I did was refuse to pay for it anymore." She sputtered, searching for a retort, but none came. She left as abruptly as she had arrived, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. In the weeks that followed, the family fractured completely. Relatives who had once fawned over Ryan now kept their distance, whispering about how they had always suspected he was too arrogant. A few cousins reached out to me, awkwardly offering apologies. "We didn't realize how much you'd done for him, Natalie," one aunt admitted over coffee. "We should have treated you better." I listened, nodded, but said little. Their words were too late. And then, one evening, Ryan appeared at my door. He looked nothing like the man who had stood so tall at his engagement party. His suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, his eyes swollen from sleepless nights. He fell to his knees before I could even speak. "Nat," he sobbed, his voice breaking. "Please. I've lost everything. Sophia's gone, the Caldwells won't return my calls, and Mom, she blames me for everything. You're all I have left. You're all I've ever had." I stood frozen, my heart twisting painfully at the sight of him. For a moment, I saw not the arrogant man who had mocked me, but the little boy clutching my hand at our father's funeral. His words, "You're all I have," were the echo of a truth I had known all my life. Tears welled in my eyes despite myself. I crouched down, reaching out as if to touch his shoulder. He looked up at me, desperate, hopeful, like a drowning man seeing land. And then I pulled my hand back. "I warned you, Ryan," I whispered, my voice thick with sorrow. "I can't save you anymore." His face crumpled as he broke down in front of me, the sobs racking his body echoing through my apartment like the ghosts of all our lost years. I turned away, tears streaming silently down my cheeks. My chest ached with grief and relief all at once. It was agony to walk away, but it was also the only way forward. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one holding him up. And as painful as it was, I knew this was the reckoning he had brought upon himself. The weeks that followed Ryan's collapse felt like stepping out of a storm into air that was finally still. For the first time in decades, I woke without the weight of his needs pressing down on me. There was no tuition to cover, no debts to settle, no endless apologies to offer in exchange for a love that had always been conditional. My apartment felt bigger, my days longer, my silence peaceful rather than suffocating. I began to draw boundaries, lines that I should have drawn years ago. My mother called once, her tone sharp, demanding that I reconsider my treatment of Ryan. I listened, then answered with quiet finality. "My life is mine now. He will not take another piece of it." She hung up in outrage, but the severing of that tether left me freer than I had ever been. I poured myself into work, but for the first time it didn't feel like work. It felt like creation. The hotel that had become the centerpiece of this saga was being renovated once again, expanded to include a rooftop garden and a ballroom designed under my vision. On the day of its grand reopening, I stood outside in the crisp morning air. My daughter's small hand clasped tightly in mine. She looked up at me, her smile wide, her eyes sparkling with pride. "You did this, Mom," she whispered. "No," I told her softly. "We did this." When the ribbon was cut and the doors swung open, cameras flashed and applause filled the street. For a brief moment, the years of sacrifice, humiliation, and betrayal melted away, replaced by the pure joy of standing tall in a place I had built with my own 2 hands. It wasn't just a victory over Ryan or Sophia or my stepmother. It was a victory over the part of me that had always believed I wasn't enough. Inside the lobby, the air was filled with music and laughter. Investors shook my hand, employees beamed with pride, and guests marveled at the space. Yet, amid the celebration, I felt a stillness settle over me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. Meanwhile, Ryan had become a ghost in the city that once adored him. He drifted from job to job, rejected at every turn. Friends who had once flocked to him avoided his calls, unwilling to associate with a man whose name had become synonymous with scandal. Paparazzi caught him once, stumbling out of a dingy bar, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes hollow. The headline read, "From Golden Boy to Fallen Man." I didn't clip the article. I didn't need to. His downfall wasn't my triumph. It was simply the consequence of choices he had made long before I ever intervened. Sophia, meanwhile, wasted no time. Within months, she appeared on the arm of another wealthy heir, her smile dazzling, her future once again secure. In her world, betrayal was currency, and Ryan had simply run out of value. I wondered if he ever realized that the woman he worshipped had been nothing more than a mirror of his own ambition, beautiful, ruthless, and loyal only to herself. One evening, weeks after the grand reopening, I stood on the rooftop garden of the hotel, watching the city lights glitter against the night sky. The view stretched endlessly, a sea of possibility. My daughter had gone to bed, her laughter still echoing in my ears, and for the first time, I felt the fragile stirrings of peace. "There are some people you don't need to take revenge on," I murmured into the night. "Time will do it for you." A voice behind me answered, low and steady. "And time has been kind to you." I turned to see Ethan standing there, his hands in his pockets, his eyes fixed on me with a mixture of admiration and something softer. He had been there through the chaos, not to fight my battles, but to remind me I wasn't as alone as I thought. I smiled faintly. Maybe, or maybe I finally learned to be kind to myself. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against mine. It was a small gesture, almost tentative, but it carried a promise I hadn't dared to hope for. A future not built on sacrifice or pain, but on choice, on freedom. For years, I had lived as the shadow, the one who gave and gave until nothing was left. Now, standing on the rooftop of the empire I had built, my daughter safe at my side and an ally by my hand, I realized something profound. I was no longer the sacrificial sister. I was simply Natalie Harris, whole, unbroken, and finally free.